So no surprise to anybody, Togashi has done it once again, because this is the first time that we've seen Hisoka on the Black Whale in the Succession War arc. And you're thinking, wait a second, wasn't there like 3 or 4 chapters in a row where we were following Hisoka from before, and we saw how Hisoka got access to Tier 1 of the ship? Well, all of that was fabrication, because that was actually Benolanov using an ability to make himself look like Hisoka. Insane. I'll try to take this in order of the chapter, but this is wild. So, all right, first of all, I love this because we're getting back into the Mafia stuff, the Phantom Troop stuff, and the Hisoka stuff, which is, I love everything that's happening in the Succession War now, but you know, I was really curious what was going on with these characters because we haven't seen them since 2 years ago, essentially. So when the last cliffhanger of the chapter ended going back to the Phantom Troop, I was hoping this chapter would double down on that and we'd see what everyone was up to, where everyone's at. And we do, for the most part. So Hisoka is on Tier 1, but it has nothing to do with anything that we saw before. Apparently, he has some connections, or he's just that skilled that he was able to get up here himself, and he's currently dealing hands at the casino, which I absolutely love. Makes sense to his character. He always has the cards around anyway. You would assume that he knows how to play poker and blackjack and all of those games anyway, so hey, why not? And you can tell that this is Hisoka based upon his inner dialogue, and I love all the stuff that's going on here. It's classic Hisoka stuff where it's making me laugh, but at the same time, it's incredibly disturbing, which is exactly what I want from Hisoka, where he talks about things that went on before that he was kind of aware of, where he was talking about the Chimera ants. He's like, that didn't really interest me. I don't really like animal bug stuff. He's like, I don't like bestiality. You know, fair. And he was talking about how he's felt the rumblings of Hulkenberg's ability whenever he fires the arrow and everybody, you know, collectively has all of their aura going at the same time and it rumbles the entire ship. And he's like, but I don't really like that stuff because, you know, you got other people involved and it comes from like a Nen beast. And he's like, none of that stuff does it for me. None of that stuff turns me on. The thing that turns me on is a simple monogamous one-on-one relationship. He's like, I'm old school, I'm boring, you know, I just like me and one other person, you know, going at it until one of us is eventually murdered. You know, that is the kind of relationship that Hisoka wants, and I deeply respect that about his character. You know, it definitely goes in line with everything that we've seen from him so far throughout the entire series, and it makes you laugh because it makes you think that if a Chimera ant did show, if he did encounter one of the Chimera ants, that he would just be like, oh, I don't think I like you. You know, and just like, he just wouldn't care. He just wouldn't give a shit. So the real Hisoka is up here in the casino, okay? And then we see another Hisoka, which we actually learn is Benolanov. And Benolanov has never been one of my favorite Phantom Troop members, but I think it's mostly because we never really got to see him do a whole lot, and I didn't really care for his Nen abilities that much when we saw them in the Chimera Ant arc. However, this chapter has almost completely changed my opinion on Benolanov because we see a lot of his inner dialogue and how he feels about the situation, and also giving us some insight into Krollo's character from his point of view, which I think is really interesting because Krollo is, of course, this enigmatic character that always kind of keeps to himself, and we haven't really seen him speak much dialogue at all since the death of Kortopi and Shalnark. You know, he's been very, very reserved. And then we got that whole flashback sequence of them as children and what happened when, you know, another one of their members, one of their friends died when they were kids, and all of the weird, disgusting stuff that was happening there that is going to play, I think, a very important role coming up in the story, and that's probably why we got all of that flashback stuff that we did, because it's going to be very relevant to Krollo's character and his motivations moving forward. But anyways, what essentially happened here was that Benolanov has another ability where he can shapeshift, but obviously with Hunter x Hunter and Nen and how all that works, there's pros and cons, there's drawbacks, so he can shapeshift into anybody that he's seen before in person, but he can only maintain that form for as long as he and that person have been around each other. So, in other words, if he wanted to shapeshift as a prince, you know, he couldn't do it probably because he's never seen them, but if he's only like walked by the prince for like 30 seconds, it wouldn't be worth it to transform because you could only hold the form for 30 seconds or whatever. But Hisoka, obviously he spent a lot of time with Hisoka because Hisoka was a member of the troop for, in all intents and purposes. He was around them for quite some time. So he's able to maintain the Hisoka form for quite some time because of that. So that's very interesting. I also wonder if inside of his mind he knows the time limit or if he just has to kind of guess. Like, that's what I'm really, really curious about. Like, when he transforms, does he know, okay, I was around Hisoka for 30 days and 41 hours and yada, yada. Like, does he know exactly how long? 41 hours would be another day. Listen, you know what I'm trying to say. Anyways, the whole point of him transforming into Hisoka was a plan from Chrollo that said, hey, can you transform into Hisoka? And what we're going to do is lead the Mafia kind of off of Hisoka's tracks because they're going to be looking for Hisoka as well. So if they think that you're Hisoka and they send you somewhere, then they'll be like, oh, okay, Hisoka's over there. And it'll allow the Phantom Troop more free reign to do what they need to do into finding Hisoka themselves. So it's basically just to kind of throw everyone else off track, which it does work. And it also has granted access for Benolanov to be on Tier 1. Although this might not turn out too well for him because Hisoka did kind of notice, he noticed Hisoka, but I got to imagine that, Hisoka knows that he's there too, So he transforms into this other guy, which is actually one of the Shadow Beast members from back in the York New City arc. Crazy callback, but that's just the way Togashi does it. Everything is relevant, everything makes sense, and he can pull from any other arc at any moment of like little tidbits and little moments that he wants to call back to. It's crazy when you think about it, and he's done this stuff so many times. Like, remember when not Kaluto, the other Zoldyck member, Alika. There was like a little outline of Alika like way back early in the Hunter x Hunter manga. And like never discussed, never talked about, and then finally they brought her back in. Just little things like that Togashi does. Like, he always plants the seeds for stuff that he's going to pull out later on. And then you also have to wonder about this moment. So there were two Mafia members that were going around trying to find Hisoka, the one that could manipulate blood, and the other one that when she punched you, you told the truth. And there was the moment where she punched Benolanov shape-shifted into Hisoka, and he did tell her the truth. It shows right there, like, he did say, I was only pretending to be Hisoka. And then there was a moment where he says, I guess you didn't hear me, right before he, like, knocks her out. And that did happen way back when they first encountered each other. So this was all, obviously it was all planned, but it's so crazy to see it all come together now. Like, the entire time, and some people did speculate about that. Like, I try not to delve too deeply into fan theories and stuff, but I remember people saying that that wasn't Hisoka. A lot of people thought it was Illumi, or even Chrollo himself. And there was the moment where he goes into the movie theater and they're watching The Thing, which is one of my favorite horror films of all time. But The Thing is a movie where the Thing can assimilate itself into human form and pretend to be somebody. So there was like symbolism there of like they're watching The Thing and it's not really Hisoka, It also makes it even funnier because that version of Hisoka, which was Benolanov, asked Hinrai who his favorite Phantom Troop member was. So like he's like, please, was it me? So I thought that was a pretty funny, that makes that whole scene like 10 times better now. But what I like here is the inner monologue of Benolanov talking about Chrollo and how he is kind of hiding a lot of how he feels, because he kind of has to, right? To keep the morale of the troop in line of what they're doing, but also that he never replaced the number of Pakunoda. Yeah, he says, you've kept the number 9 slot open this whole time. And, it wouldn't really make sense for that to be Kortepi or Shalnark because they just died right before they got onto the ship. So it seems like, these deaths of the Phantom Troop members are really, really taking a toll on him because they've lost Pakunoda, Uvugen, Shalnark, and Kortepi, and it's building up. And I think it's all reminding him of that first death from the backstory that we saw and the girl that was taken and stolen and murdered. And that's even brought up here in the next page where they're talking about this on the TV. And I assume this was, to be honest with you guys, I didn't recognize the face, but just from like the storytelling perspective, like this is it was so obviously meant to be like the child traffickers that we saw before. So I had to go back to that chapter and look at the face, and it is the same face of the same guy. It should be over here on the screen. Sorry. But yeah, and I love how you don't see Crollo look at the TV. He's not looking at the screen. He's not commentating. He doesn't have any inner dialogue. And you know that it all goes back to that moment. Like, that's the thing that broke him from the start. And that's the thing about why he is so chaotic when any of the Phantom Troop members die. When Uvogin died, he took out all of those Mafia members. He's just like, fuck everybody. We're going to make a massive display in your honor. You know, it's like, it's all about the group, you know, and he says, you know, hey, even if the head dies, the group has to go on. You know, he says these things, I think. I mean, Crollo's a complex character. You can view him in many different ways, but I think that he really tries to keep the spirits up of everybody around him when he takes on all the burden himself of what's happening on the inside, you know? Now, I also want to say something that I thought about reading this chapter that might not have anything to do with what's happening, but to me, it's just like so in my face, I can't ignore it. So when you're looking at the characters here between Crollo and Hisoka, as well as Morena and Serenich, I see so many parallels, it's almost crazy. So, you know, Crollo comes from Meteor City, and it's a place where he's disregarded, wasn't cared for, you know, kind of had to build all of this up himself. Like, he comes from the lowest side of society, right? And I kind of feel the same way about Morena. And even in the last half of this chapter, even though there are some things that confuse me about Nobunaga saying, like, is this the real Hylia family? Like, it has to be, at least Morena has to be, because they all know who Morena is. Maybe all of her members and her followers are not like traditional Hylia family, but Morena is, right? I don't know. Anyways, besides all that, I feel the same way about Morena. I feel like Morena and Crollo have so much in common with the way that they've kind of taken their spots of being at the lowest ends of society and created themselves as a leader of a particular group where their followers truly believe in them, you know, to the highest regard, and they try to give their followers the best benefits they can. Whereas, you know, Crollo tries to make sure everybody is able to do what they want, and then Morena is giving everybody Nen abilities and having them level up and create this chaos that they want. Just as, you know, Crollo is like, you know, when like Uvogin died, like, go, you know, create chaos, like destroy everything. And it's like both of those characters, I feel like, come from a very similar place, and you know, they're like parallels of one another, right? At least I feel like they are. And then on the opposite side, you have you have Hisoka and Serenich, who are both very solitary characters that are very fascinated by what they can do, what other people can do, and learning as much as they can about it, basically singling out particular, you know, prey, you know, where Serenich kind of preys on women. He was like a woman murderer, and Hisoka is also this like homicidal maniac that goes after particular prey that I guess you could say is similar in the fact that they're turned on by it. I mean, Serenich, you know, I don't know if he's as turned on as he is just like a hateful, like misogynistic character, but like, you know, goes after women victims specifically, where, you know, Hisoka is a lot more open to the variety of, you know, the type of people he goes after, but it's still very like a sick, sexual, sadistic kind of thing. They both have that kind of similarity. And the crazy part to me is that Morena and Serenich are connected in the fact that that's the mafia group that Serenich kind of supports behind the scenes. So there's got to be some kind of story cohesion with that when you have Morena and Crollo on one side, and then you have Hisoka and Serenich on the other side. Like, they're so direct parallels of one another that it's actually insane. And I got to imagine that has, you know, a significant thing to do with what's going to happen in the story. I just don't know what it is. And also, maybe Serenich is somebody that Hisoka knows that allowed him access onto Tier 1. I mean, sure, he didn't have the ability to use Nen, you know, before the succession contest happened, but Serenich also seems like the kind of guy that Hisoka would want to keep his eye on. And if I look at all the other princes, I can't I can't pick out any one of them that Hisoka would give the single, little bit of a shit about other than Serenich. Seems perfectly Hisoka's type. So, like, it just seems like maybe that's the case. And maybe Morena and Crollo, something's going to happen there. And then Serenich and Hisoka. Could you imagine those two versus those two? Insane. Well, regardless, I do have confusion, like I said, about them saying that it's not the real Hylia family. I'm assuming that just means all of her followers, and they're probably more specific to her. Like I said, it's been a while since I went back and read the old chapters, so I can't quite remember during the introduction of when she was like passing on her ability to everybody if that was in the cards or not. But this guy shows up with the dog face, which is kind of funny because Togashi always draws himself as like a little dog character at the end of the chapter. So I don't know, maybe this is going to be the most powerful character, representing Togashi. And he has a really powerful ability where it seems like he can tell what Nen type somebody uses, and maybe, if I'm reading this right, even tell what their ability is before they use it, which would be crazy. So that would be a pretty devastating character to get into the mix too. And then it looks like, again, if I'm reading this right, there's these three other characters here that are leveling up, that have been leveling up, and they're leading the Phantom Troop, the main three that have gone up against the Hylia. So it's Phaeton, Finks, and Nobunaga. Then they open the door, and I don't know if they're leading them right to these three characters, but I wouldn't count the Phantom Troop out. There's so many times where characters are like, oh, we got this, and then the Phantom Troop just wrecks them. But maybe this is the time that the tables will finally turn on that. I don't know. Overall, though, I really, really enjoyed this chapter. I like that we're getting back into the Mafia stuff. But the thing I like about it, too, is I feel like it's finally starting to really converge, because you have the Hulkenberg funeral that's going to happen, and Morena's like, yeah, go there, kill a bunch of people. A bunch of people are going to be there, so go kill a bunch of people. So there's that. And there's all the other stuff that can potentially happen with that. So, you got Hulkenberg and Balsamilko's body. So, yeah, there's so many weird things that can happen, man. But this was a great chapter. Definitely enjoyed it. So leave all your thoughts, theories, comments, and opinions down below. As always, guys, thanks for watching this video. Please give it a thumbs up and a comment if you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.